Welcome to Power Skills 2020. Thank you so much for joining us. As we let people into the room, please feel free to use the chat function and let us know where you're all tuning in from. Just a couple of house rules. Please make sure that your mics remain on mute. If you want to keep your videos on, you can. However, we do recommend that you turn your videos off to preserve bandwidth. Amazing, we have people from Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, Burlington, amazing. This is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Point Claire, good old West Island, Moncton, fantastic. Jamaica, welcome. Give it a couple more seconds. Hey, someone from Brazil, welcome. That's fantastic. A truly international crowd. So without further ado, we're going to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Power Skills 2020. I'm so happy to see so many of you tuning in today. My name is Valerie Nduweni, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Rosalia Felice. Want to say hi, Rosalia?
Hi, everyone, and welcome.
Now, Rosalia is not only a colleague, she's our manager, and I'm also joined by Emily Salvi. You want to say hey?
Hello, welcome.
On behalf of McGill University, the McGill School of Continuing Studies, and the entire CATS team, welcome. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first Power Skills event, thank you for tuning in. If you're coming back for more, thank you for giving us your time this week. We truly appreciate it, and we're really looking forward to this upcoming discussion. So today we're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion, and that is something that has been forefront in the last few months, especially given world events. So we thought it important to have a panel so that we can kind of discuss the issues around that, unpack that, and give you guys useful tools. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. I'm going to say their names, and they will speak for themselves and give you a little bit more information about what they do. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to Samantha Bateman, Talent Acquisition Consultant.
Hi, everybody. So should I just launch into an introduction right now, Valerie?
Absolutely, go for it. Let us know what you do, and also maybe if you can finish off by letting us know what diversity and inclusion means to you.
So yeah, my name is Samantha Bateman. I was a student at McGill a million years ago with a degree in political science, and essentially fell into the world of human resources. Quickly realized that I was not suited to a career in HR, but boy, did I love talent acquisition. And so I had left a great company and went into agency for what I say is 2 years too long, because that agency environment was just not for me. Did see a lot of discriminatory practices, to be honest, and started Integria Consulting 15 years ago. I would tell you that my specialty is really more in placing leadership roles, HR, sales, marketing, operations. And I've been a pretty outspoken critic of the recruitment practice, among other things. And diversity and inclusion, what it means to me. I mean, these days, it means that we need to have a lot more discussions around this. I think there's a lot of people who have their blinders on, I think there's a lot of people who don't see what many of us are seeing. And I think we need to have more honest conversations. And because I pass, meaning that I'm a quarter Black and I pass as white, I am in a perfect position to be able to highlight things that I see and really feel that I'm able to essentially, so that's my daughter in the back wearing her McGill t-shirt.
Amazing.
Zoom calls. I forgot to put a post-it on my door. So anyway, all this to say that I'm in a privileged position of being able to call out certain things without fear of any type of reprisal or any business loss. That's my story.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Next up, Mata Malatab is a talent acquisition partner.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy. Actually, I have this opportunity to talk with you today. So I started my career as a project coordinator back home. When immigrated to Canada in 2013, I thought, okay, it's time for a change for me. So I studied human resources at McGill. And at the time, I was like, okay, let's start something. And I was a newcomer to Canada, so you know that I didn't have Canadian experience. So I looked for something, I found an internship, and after 3 months, I launched a full-time career. And I worked in human resources for 1.5 years in Montreal. Then I immigrated again to Toronto. And then I had the opportunity to work with this amazing not-for-profit who helped newcomers to Canada, people with disability, and new grads, like basically people who are facing barriers to find meaningful career and opportunity at work. And that's where I really found myself in a fan of diversity and inclusion, because this is everything for us, I think, especially in Canada, having a diverse population. So I was working there for almost 3 years, and recently, like 4 months ago, I decided that I really need to get my hand dirty and educate some other people, especially hiring managers. So I started in another company as a talent acquisition partner, and I'm recruiting people for a very fantastic company right now.
Thank you so much and welcome, Mata.
Thank you.
Next up is Toby Oluwole. Is that correct? Sorry.
That is correct.
And he is the co-founder of 3 Skills. Welcome, Toby.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. I am Nigerian. I come from a very long line of entrepreneurs. And I got into entrepreneurship when I was 14, selling lollipops at school. And the first day, my inventory was confiscated by my teacher. So I learned my first lesson in entrepreneurship there, which is make sure it's legal. And that was how I got into just starting businesses. I moved to Canada at 15 in 2010. I did a year of high school at Columbia International College, which is in Hamilton, Ontario. And I did 5 years of university at Carleton, where I studied international business. And while I was at Carleton, I think I started a business every single year. I was a very troublesome student. I wanted to drop out in second year. My dad didn't let me. I'm glad he didn't. And I ended up finishing and getting into tech sales. So I worked in tech for 3 years in sales, 4 years actually. And then this year, I started working in merchant success at Shopify. And sometime in between there, last year, I found a pretty unique idea, which is what 3 Skills became. Because I was talking to a Canadian friend, and she was struggling to find a job. and she had paid a company like $2,400 to help her with her resume and her LinkedIn and her everything else, interview skills. So I got my best friend and a couple university people together and said, hey, do you think we can solve this problem for international students? Because we had come here as international students. And obviously, you know, the struggle of, you know, no experience and a lot more other struggles. And we decided that we were going to try to solve the problem. And so we kicked off 3 skills, and a year later, it helped almost 40 people land jobs, which was really, really rewarding. And then we started to scale it this year. So that's what we do full-time and part-time. And diversity and inclusion for me is really just making sure that we have every voice at the table, and that those voices feel like they belong at that table, and that they get credit for the ideas that they have at that table. So I think that's really what it means to me, and I'm really excited to be on this panel actually. So thanks for having me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Toby. Next up, Maria Gracia Girardi, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisor. Welcome, Maria Gracia.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. I'm also a McGill graduate, like most people here. And I did an honors degree in Latin American Studies and International Development. And it was in one of my economic development classes that I had this aha moment of learning about and realizing the impact that women and empowered women have on communities, on future generations, on society. And that sparked for me a passion for women's rights. And I went on to do a master's in gender studies and public policy for gender equality, and worked as a consultant in international development projects in Peru, in Colombia, in Senegal, in Spain. And after a few years of living and working abroad, I came back to Montreal. And I started working at an NGO that offers programs and services to girls and women, like housing, employment services, access to justice, and also youth outreach programs in schools. And one of the projects that I worked on, and in line with what we're talking today, and also the reason why I met some of the CATS team members like Valerie and Rosalia and Emily, was a project where we made a short film using virtual reality to show what looking for work looks like from an immigrant woman's perspective, to raise awareness among recruiters and employers about unconscious biases. So very excited to be here. And for me, diversity and inclusion and equity are, they're perceived as these matters that can be intimidating, and they're complex, but they're also exciting, and they're also, I think there's a very uplifting side of them, because there's a human, a very human aspect behind it. We're talking about people, we're talking about relationships between people. So I think that that's the part that I like about it, the human greatness of diversity and inclusion, and how we can be better as a society in general.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Last but not least, Mr. Olivier Dupiton, professional matchmaker, modern day recruiter, and a trusted advisor. Welcome.
Hi everyone. Thank you for this, for welcoming me to this event. My name is Olivier Dupiton. Like Valerie said, I am a career advisor. I was with CATS in the past, and then now I work as a recruiter at Randstad. My background pretty much is I I grew up in Haiti. I moved back to Montreal. I'm gonna go a little bit fast. I came back to Montreal when I was 17, and from 17, I fell in love with basketball. Basketball led me to go to the U.S. to play for over 6 years. When I was there, I earned a business administration degree, then also earned a master's in organizational leadership. All that to say, those transition coming from Haiti to Montreal to eventually in the States, coming back to Montreal and then started a career that allowed me to always be, I always felt like I was an immigrant, although I was born here, and I was always transitioning. Therefore, when I started working as an advisor and helping professionals from many other cultures to transition here, that's when the calling started for me to continue to have a voice and to help and to empower others to position themselves and to find opportunities. So that's kind of how I am here today, and then I'm looking forward to expand on that a little bit more later.
Thank you so much. Welcome to our panelists again. This is such a treat for us all to gain insights from your very varied backgrounds, but there is very much a common thread. So I'm just going to jump into it. The reason why it was important to kind of construct this panel is, you know, diversity, inclusion, equity, they've been at the forefront of HR for many years now. We know that companies have these policies and statements about, you know, fair recruitment practices, and yet it's still an issue. Would you guys like to share why that is? Samantha, would you like to jump in?
I'm in the hot seat again. First of all, well, I can only give my perspective here, right? I mean, look, I think there are, when there's a spotlight on public companies, for example, right, then I think diversity and inclusion conversations have been happening for a lot longer, right? I would tell you that, oh my gosh, there's so much to talk about here, so much to unpack.
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of organizations that don't get it. And in part, they don't get it because they've never had to get it, right? I mean, when you look at leadership, that's, you know, at different levels, and I'm talking from, you know, supervisors to managers to senior executives, you know, a lot of organizations have not had to be too concerned with diversity and inclusion. So while, you know, diversity and inclusion has been spoken about, yes, for a number of years, I feel that it's literally taken the murder of numerous African Americans in, you know, recent months to really highlight and really open up, blast open this conversation around diversity and inclusion. And we do a great job here in Quebec. Don't get me wrong, you know, I love my province, but we do a great job of making people feel like, oh, it's because you don't speak French, or it's because you know, you don't have experience with unions, for example, or, you know, we use that as a means to keep people out. So, you know, I'm so curious to find out what other people's opinions and insights are, but I would say that, you know, we worked with Fortune 500 companies 10 years ago that were talking about the need for having a more diverse workforce and a more diverse leadership, because they understood the importance, right? Mm-hmm. And yet, there are organizations out there who, you know, will still say, oh, like that name, where are they from, right? They just don't get it. So we have a lot of work to do, and it's going to take years, because if you don't see diversity even at the supervisory level or the management level, it will literally take years before you'll start seeing them at the executive level in these organizations. So I think a lot of it has to do also with people just referring people that look like them and people within their circles. And so if you're always doing that within your little circle and you never go outside of that, then yeah, you're never going to see any diversity in these organizations.
Amazing. Maria Gracia.
Trying to find the mute button. I actually would love to hear what my other panelists have to say on that from a human resource perspective on that question, and then I'll jump in.
You'll jump in from the educational Okay,
exactly.
Love that. Mata.
So I think that diversity and inclusion is a culture, is a change in mindset, and obviously it doesn't happen overnight. So every single person, every single person who is working should do something about it. Like, it's not enough just to care about it. We should care enough to change something about it. And it happens with all of us. It happens with human resources trying to educate the hiring managers. It happens with so many other people to just have a change in their mindset that what does it mean not to have a Canadian experience? Like, working is working no matter where in the world, you know? So this is all about just developing this culture and having this change in the mindset.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Toby.
So I think we've been having a lot of these conversations like over the past 4 months. I think I've had it in like at least 3 or 4 organizations where it's like everyone is starting from a different place around their understanding of what diversity and inclusion is. And so we essentially start from a different place each time we have the conversation. Because to some people, it's like half of our leadership team should be Black or women, and that's where they're starting. And to other people, it's like, well, we have one Black person in our company, and that's diversity and inclusion, and that's where they're starting. And so to me, it's just understanding that it is quite the process to get to a place where diversity or inclusion is the norm, and not just this like, you know, really high goal that you one day want to hit. And it's also important to understand, like I've been preaching this at a few of the companies that I've spoken with, which is you cannot document your way to diversity. Like there's no amount of documentation that will actually make your company one day be like, we have reached diversity. Like that's not how that happens, right? So it's just super important to understand that representation is important, especially in leadership. If I see, you know, people that look like me in leadership, that's going to start to change the way that the company just grows. I was actually at one company in Toronto, and I made sure not to do any research on their leadership team, and I wanted to see if I could guess what their leadership team was made up of by seeing the Zoom call of who was working at the company. And so 70 of them log in, and most of them were Asian. And so I said on the call that I could tell what their leadership team looked like just by looking at their employees. And I think that was like a pretty big tell of like, if you want to get to a place where, you know, your company is diverse but also inclusive, then one, your leadership team should obviously start to look more diverse, and that's going to have a natural effect downwards into the company. And then the second thing is just having conversations with like the employees that don't look like you and bridging a lot of the gaps, because I do find there's still a lot of gaps between, you know, the people, not just the people at the top or, you know, whatever it is, but there's just gaps even between people, right? Just understanding each other's stories, because that also then starts to impact who you refer, how you recruit, you know, who you promote, by just closing that gap. So it is just exciting though to be having this conversation, because it's one of those things that's long overdue. And to me, this feels like a revolution that's happening because the conversation's been going. It doesn't seem to be slowing down, and a lot of change is coming out of it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Mr. Dupiton.
Yes, there's so much to say about it, and I don't even know exactly where to start, because just like Toby mentioned, the conversation always stops somewhere and can start anywhere. To me, diversity and inclusion, it's more like you said, it's more of it's not a structure. You cannot document it. You cannot just it's not about how many people that you have from different cultures or different genders. It's really about the culture of the company. So you can have the numbers, every single different types of people at the company, but do they belong there, right? What is the culture of that company? Because like Samantha mentioned before, a lot of the time people like to refer their own people. So you have a company that is full of the same types of people in terms of mindset, in terms of cultures, and then you have others that comes from different cultures. They are there, yes, but they do not feel part, right, of that culture. And coming from being a person of color, you always a lot of times it's like normal for you to not be home. You are used to always adjust and adapt. And part of the reason I'm here today, it's just to highlight the fact that others that care about the subject should listen and try to understand. And then that's why I like about this subject today, and the whole the events that's been happening in the last for 2-3 months. I think that there is a lot of things that are done just for the sake of doing them, but the positive thing is the fact that the conversation is happening, and maybe we can reach a few more people that are here today and listening. So that's really what I wanna pass on today. It's to let people know that a lot of people do not feel at home. And if you ever go somewhere where you are the only person there and then you don't feel comfortable, think about it. Maybe that's how a lot of people feel on a regular basis around you every day.
Amazing, such a true point, and we're going to really dive into the inclusion piece. It's not enough to just say, we have 5 Black people or 5 Latinos at our company. What is the experience? And we're going to unpack some of the things that companies can do and we can do as individuals to make sure that people feel included. Maria Gracia, you are an advisor at the Polytechnique. So can you give us kind of like that education perspective? Because this is not about just the workplace. Our institutions are places of education as well, have diversity and inclusion issues. Would you like to share?
Yeah. And I think that there sometimes can be this paradox or irony that universities are places of knowledge, of openness in an intellectual way. So we would think that they're places where it's possible to be more progressive thinking. But I think that even with the best of intentions, there's still some common challenges, which I think the first that comes to my mind is the resistance to change. So having a culture, an organizational culture, and I'm just speaking in general, that is maybe more conservative than one may think of a university institution, because historically, certain positions of authority and of decision making have been held by a certain very homogenous group of people, and that has all been changing, but there's still a lot more efforts to be done. And on top of that, there might be also lack of resources, and these resources can be actual people who are thinking about these things or working on these things full time as part of a team, rather than just this one person who maybe, part-time tries to assemble something that is short-lived. Or it can be lack of resources in terms of money to put into place initiatives that are more structural and have a longer term vision. It could also be time, in the sense of everybody's busy, and sometimes these matters of diversity and inclusion, they are seen as this like a nice to have thing that when we have time we'll get to it, or it's not as important, or is not a priority, an institutional priority, and more of a side project, that a box that needs to be checked. So there's that, and there's also the practices or the policies, structures that can also hinder progress. So things that beyond the individuals who want to, who are well-meaning, but if there's already in place certain structures that make so that some people are excluded because of an understanding of excellence in a traditional way that is very exclusionary and very elitist, of only the best get in, and only but who has defined that excellence, and what values are we attributing to what being excellent means? And also, so there's all of that, and another thing I think is also data. Sometimes a lack of keeping track of certain things on paper. I really like what you Toby said about you cannot document your way to diversity, and I think that's absolutely true, especially when initiatives are just being listed to say, yes, look at all the things we've done, so obviously we are very good, and we should get a passing grade. But at the same time, there's something to be said for also keeping track, measuring what progress looks like, and knowing where you're at and where you want to get, and what progress are you making to get there. So you do need numbers and data in that sense. And maybe the last thing would be, there's a lot of information. I think there's a lot of information out there, and we can have this phenomenon with other things in our lives. Like, there's so much information out there that sometimes it's overwhelming and you don't even know where to start. And at the same time, that information doesn't always get to the right people. And so some people are also left clueless, and we also have to work to get the information to the right people, and especially key people who have influence, and people who have decision-making power, but also in general, on the topic of inclusion, every colleagues and everyone who participates in making working environments, a place where we spend so much time, places where everybody feels that they can contribute to their full potential.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I've been looking at the chat, and there's quite a few questions, and I will do my best to make sure that the panelists tackle your comments and questions. I just want to draw attention to Barb Miles, who brought up that people with disabilities are also kind of not part of the mainstream conversation when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So I'd like to kind of touch up on that, because I find when we start talking about diversity and inclusion, it becomes a racial issue. It becomes Black versus white, and diversity is beyond the color. Would you guys like to talk about that, and maybe some of the things you've seen about other groups, whether it be sexual orientation or disabilities, gender issues? Can we kind of touch up on that, Samantha? In your work, has that come up a lot?
So it's interesting because, you know, you're making me think when we talk about disabilities, we've had situations where candidates had to take a break for a few years just because of health challenges, right? So they've had cancer, or they've had, you know, a disease or something of that nature. So we're not even talking about disabilities here, but just in terms of the perception of, will this person be able to contribute to the level of somebody who's never been ill, or who doesn't have a disability, or who doesn't have kids, or who doesn't, right? You see where I'm going with this? So I think that in general, there's this perception of, are you going to be able to do the job as well as somebody else who's unencumbered in any way? And that is, that's a big challenge for people to have to overcome when you talk about, you know, safe places where you can really be yourself and express, even, you know, in an interview, to be able to say, yeah, well, I did take a 2-year break because I did have an accident and I do have these health challenges right now. So, and I don't have a quick fix around this. I think it really comes down to, you know, just the same way, like we can't ask people, do you have any kids that can prevent you from, you know, like you have to be on daycare pickup basically, or school pickup. There needs to be a certain sensitivity around some of the challenges that some people may have, right? And an understanding that you can do the work. And really at the end of the day, I think COVID, one thing that I think is possibly going to be very helpful for a lot of people is understanding that it's not if you see the person and if they're there and if they're putting in their 8 hours, it's, are they doing the work that's expected of them, right? So, you know, but I think we could do much better. And, you know, when we talk about disabilities as well, I want to say, like, if anybody has ever had to take a stroller downtown or use public transit, just with a stroller, right? Forget about having challenges around being able to walk yourself and open doors and being able to, you know, what do you do when the elevator is broken? You know, there's so many issues, and these are things around the infrastructure in Montreal that needs to change as well. So it goes beyond. I remember having an office space with a small company years ago, and they said that they were diversity recruiters, and yet they were in a walk-up in a brownstone. I mean, I don't understand. I really don't understand. And nowhere near a metro, like it just didn't make any sense. So how can you really say that you're, you know, a diversity recruiter when you're not looking at, you know, everything? So this is just some of the challenges that people have to face. We've got a lot of work to do in Montreal, right?
And I don't think we're gonna get answers today. I think this is just the part of the conversation that needs to continue beyond power skills. It's a conversation that needs to happen within your individual spheres of influence. Ageism as well. It was commented in the chat. And with the rise of intergenerational teams, I find, you know, younger people have an issue in terms of the workplace where they're not necessarily always considered for higher positions because the attitude is you have to do your time, versus older people who are trying to transition and they're having a hard time either returning to the workforce or finding other positions because they're perceived as too old. How can we start to change that paradigm? I don't know if it's the HR, the recruiter, who's the gatekeeper, or is it a company culture? You guys have any thoughts? Olivier, as a recruiter.
Well, it is a bit of both, right? Right before I answer to this, I just quickly want to say that going back to the comment that Bob made, as a leader, we have to take ownership, and for us to if we want people to listen and to be more aware, we also have to do the same thing. I'm very vocal about diversity, about race issues, about things that are important to me, and could be less aware about things that are important in the world in general or for others. So this is a reminder for myself, and also just, you know, for others to be more mindful. For example, the disability issue is something that, because it's not my fight, maybe I don't voice it enough, or I'm not a voice for this, for this issue. And we can all take part in helping it go a bit further. So that's what I really wanted to mention based on that, because most people, because I am coming from one side and then asking people to be more open-minded and then to listen. So we need to do it as well. And the other question it comes from the recruiters, and it's also come from the leadership and the culture of the company. So part of the leadership need to understand the kind of culture that they have, and then to see if they need to help the recruiters understand that culture, and then go and show it to the kind of people that they recruit. Or it could be vice versa, where the recruiters or the HR professionals challenge leadership a little bit based on their what they see, right? So you need leaders at all levels, from the lower level and then the high level, to assess what's missing and then challenge each other.
Amazing, thank you. I think we all have an unconscious bias. It's the filter through which we look at the world. And when it comes to, recruitment, Mata, can you kind of give us some tools and tricks that recruiters can use to kind of filter through their unconscious bias when they're faced with a candidate who's very different from themselves?
So I think the struggle here in diversity and inclusion is we should be aware of the differences, and we should be given the same opportunity. We shouldn't be eliminated just because we are different. Like, I have an accent and I know that. Maybe I have a name somebody can't pronounce. Maybe I'm older than some other people, or I'm a person with disability. But what is important is like what value I can bring to the table, like what I can bring to the company, and that is more valuable thing. So I think this is something that we have to have in mind when, like, as a recruiter, I'm sourcing, like that added value that a different person can bring is important. I know as people, we have a fear of unknown, and this pandemic actually is a very good example. So we don't know what's going on, what's happening, and what will happen in future. But maybe it's not that we don't know exactly. So just bring people and think out of the box, like what people can bring. It's very important. So we should have an open mind to see the differences, not, I don't know, afraid of having unknown stuff in the company, and go for unknown stuff. So as a recruiter, I think it's very important to educate the hiring manager what a new person, a different person, I might say, can bring to the whole team and add value to the team.
Thank you. Such a good point. And I was reflecting not so long ago about, the change in the board with Reddit. And Alexi Onahine stepped down and said he wants to be replaced by a Black candidate. And that sparked the biggest debate on social media. I find social media is good good ground to kind of see like where the human consciousness is right now. And what struck me is the conversation that said, you know, why do you need to hire, be it a woman or a person of color? We should be looking at the best candidate. And it struck me that the assumption is because someone is different, they're being hired to meet a diversity quota, which makes the environment at work very difficult for that candidate, because am I here because of my qualifications, or am I here because they needed someone different to meet a diversity quota? Would you guys like to weigh in on that?
Well, I would like to, if I could, just a point around the recruitment aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when we're recruiting, if you see that all the engineers you're recruiting are white males, that's a problem, right? Like, you look at your sourcing list and you think, okay, who am I missing from this list? I mean, at one point, you know, we were looking for engineers, and every time it was always white males. So we had to do better, right? In terms of producing a slate of candidates. So yeah, if your focus is just, well, we recruited, we posted an ad, or we headhunted, and this is all we came back with, and we've got that one, you know, person of color to put into the mix, and hopefully that's who they're going to hire. That doesn't work, right? So you need to consciously make an effort where you're saying, okay, well, we have this slate of candidates and they're all male, there's no females, or they're all white, there's nobody of color, or they're all this, or they're all that, to look for some diversity in there. And it's going to just add so much to the organization. But when we talk about data, right, and I understand that you can't make decisions based solely on data, I have to say, there was a candidate that I met recently who had talked to me about how he was recruiting in a remote area of Quebec. And it was for project managers. And these were very seasoned project managers, you know, like salaries of, you know, $150,000, $200,000. And all of the candidates that were being sent, none were being retained until a senior executive had a conversation with them, taking them to task for not presenting the right candidates because nobody was getting hired. And when he collected the data and presented it, he said anybody who doesn't have a French name is not getting past the hiring manager. So it's not that we haven't done our job in presenting candidates, is that they've been blocked by the hiring manager in this remote area because it's not a very inclusive environment. And so they've just decided not to move forward. So they did their job, but by presenting the data, the executive had a conversation with the hiring manager around what the recruitment practices looked like. And they were able to build out a much better recruitment practice, let's just say. So I think data has its place and is important to be able to show what's going on behind the scenes in terms of, you know, why certain people are not being moved forward.
Mm-hmm. And that brings an interesting point, whitewashing your name. And I can share a personal anecdote for people who have names that are difficult to pronounce. As a way around, one of the strategies has been to either use your middle name, which is what I do. So my first name is Nozipo, and I never got calls. No one would call me for an interview. But the minute I use my middle name, Valerie, all of a sudden I'm a bit more palpable. Would you guys like to touch on that? And what are the strategies or things that people can do if they have very foreign names to continue their work and transition and find the roles that are suited for them?
Well, I'd like to expand on that. I just wanted to mention the fact that working as a recruiter now, this is not a solution. I'm just going to showcase what we go through and what we have to do. It's a bit of the behind the scene. Often when we are presenting a candidate to the companies that we work with, if the person name is Sergey, for example, to be able to help that, I might change that person name for Serge. when I just sent a quick description of that person. And this is definitely not the right thing to do, right? Because we want to empower Sergey to be Sergey and sell Sergey as Sergey. But when you are trying to help Sergey find that opportunity, you want him, you want to find him a seat at the table. So when you present him as Serge, and they get to read the description, they get to read the CV, and they are very interested in meeting him. Then when Sergey gets to the interview, then the companies, the recruiters, the managers, they're a bit more open to meet Sergey compared to if they just saw the name and the same experience, then it's not as attractive for them. So that's some of the practices that we use. And you can tell me, yes, Olivier, but that's not right. It's your job to also refuse to work with those companies. Well, we do when we have a company that kind of tell us we're looking for cultural proximity, and that it's a way for them to not tell you we're looking for people that have Tremblay as their last name, right? But they don't say it in those words. Therefore, we do say no to a lot of companies that tells us those kind of stuff. But there is a lot of behind the scene. There's a lot of stuff that are not shown and said. Therefore, if I meet Sergey and I really want to help him, maybe calling him Serge is the best thing to do for him to get a seat at the table and eventually get accepted for who he is and what he has to offer and get that job.
Thank you so much for your honesty, Olivier. Toby, would you like to chime in? Because you do a lot of work with international students in terms of getting them ready for the workplace and training them on how to get a job. Does this come up?
Yeah, it came up for me. My first name has 13 letters in it. It's actually Oluwatobi Lava. So Toby is, what I chose. But Toby was, my mom always called me Toby, so it wasn't a big deal. My passport says Olu Toby, just for, I guess, length's sake. And when I would apply for jobs, I wouldn't get calls. I changed it to Toby. I started getting calls. People still think my full name is Tobias, and it's fun correcting them. But with our students, it started off very much as, like I find I change my mind easily when I'm convinced by something, right? So it started off with, hey, you might need to change your name so that you can at least get in the door, right? And then I took a really hard 180 and went, don't change your name. If they're good people, they'll bring you in anyway. And then I came back to the middle and went okay, we are dealing with a system that was constructed a very certain way, right? There's a reason why Toby works. And so if you have a shorter version of your name, or if you have a name that you're okay being called, then let's go with that, right? And I get some students that go, no, I'm not going to do that. And I go, hey, good for you, right? And I get other students that go that's a good idea. And I go, good for you. And so we start to, open it up and go, okay, what are you comfortable with? We do the same thing with pictures on resumes. It's are you comfortable with the picture on resume, or are you not comfortable with the picture on resume? I'm not going to recommend you do or don't, right? But what I have found though is that change happens from the inside. And so on the surface, I wouldn't agree with what Olivier does, but when I hear him, I go, that is so brilliant, because if you're going to create some proximity, then you at least have to get them in the door, right? So now I understand, and this is why I think conversations are so powerful, because if someone wrote that in a one sentence, I changed my clients' names to fit, I'd be like, why the hell are you doing that?
Yeah.
But when I hear the heart behind it, I go, that is someone that cares, right? And so I feel like now, for our international students, for people that are just different, right? one thing I've been saying is let's just get diverse recruiters. That's a big start, right? Like getting some more diverse recruiters so that they can actually, you know, they're the gatekeepers in a lot of these places, whether it's talent sourcing or, you know, just recruiting for HR. But on the other side, it's like, okay, we either do blind resumes or we do what, you know, Olivier is doing, or we, you know, just do our best to get people in the door. But this is like a really big system that we're fighting against, even with this topic, right? Like, this is not a, like, we have a great idea, like, let's execute. Like, that's not really what it is, right? Like, there's so many layers of what needs to be, like we talk about unconscious biases, right? Yeah, you know, they are there, right? But one of the things that we use is a look like me rule, right? If I'm interviewing somebody that doesn't look like me, I'm going to have somebody during that process that looks like my candidate, so that when we talk, I can get the biases out that I may have had, right? And that look like me rule is so powerful because I don't know what I don't know. I didn't know that making that comment would be offensive. Like, I just don't know. And that is a real thing. And I used to get so mad at white recruiters going like, how can you say that? Or, you know, but it's like, I have no context for what that means. So by just having someone that looks like this person, I'm able to then bridge the gap, right? So, you know, whitewashing the name, I hate it. I hate that people have to do it. I hate that, you know, I can't be myself anywhere. And a lot of people feel that way. But it's the system, right? Like, if we're going to actually change it, we at least have to be on the inside, right? So that's just something that we've picked up, and I'm a very optimistic person, and I'm learning to like accept reality for what it is. And now that I'm seeing how it can be changed from the inside, I'm going, do what you can to get in the door, and then fight all the way once you're in.
Yeah, and on that note about the whitewashing names, you may be aware of a study by la Commission des droits de la personne et de la jeunesse that compared CVs with different last names and showed that, so exactly the same CV, but when it was with a French-Canadian name in Quebec, that person got 60% more chances to be called in an interview than if the last name was Arab sounding or African or Latin American. So it's been documented in many different ways to many different levels, which is why making a link to what you were saying at the other conversation that we were having about, you know, replacing someone and asking, am I here for my qualifications or am I here just to fill a quota? And I feel that actions like quotas are definitely polemic. They're very, there's people against it, there's people for it, but I think that there's something to be said for affirmative action, for actually doing something and actually having targets and goals that you can work towards, because just saying we want to do better or just writing a nicely worded statement doesn't, you know, and that concretely doesn't get you anywhere. Whereas if you have a certain objective to reach, then you can see, are you falling short and what are you going to do to reach that? And so, for example, in what that looks like in recruiting practices is that maybe you need a certain percentage of CVs, you know, that come from diversity, or another one, because I work in an environment where it's male dominated, so it's STEM field, like science, technology, engineering, mathematics, so there's very little women. So another approach that another university has used to get more women into engineering is that they make two piles of CVs, one for men, one for women. So instead of comparing one great woman to 10 great male CVs, and of course you're going to end up choosing, you have, you know, more of a pool to choose, they will always find, you know, like who's the best of the, you know, female CV pile, who's the best of the male CV pile, and then compare them, and also think about what is the requirement, the minimum requirements that you need, and does that person fit them? Then she's great for the position, or he's great for the position. So there's tons of things that can be done, but it is also important to have goals. And if not, if we just wait for things to change on their own, they won't. Progress is not linear. It's not a matter of time, and 200 years will be better. Sometimes it's like we you know, I think maybe just as impatient human beings, we want to see changes within our lifetimes. So I think there's something to be said about those things, to like get in people, and then the change will come from within for having people inside.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you know, culture fit is Samantha, you mentioned this, and there are people in the audience that would like you guys to kind of talk about culture fit. When you apply for a job, you have all the qualifications, you put your heart and soul into applying, you've dotted your I's, you've crossed your T's, and you're still told you're not the right fit. Is there anything that can be done about that, or it's just the way things are? Samantha, I'm dying to know what you would think about that, because it's something that you talk about a lot on LinkedIn. So perhaps sharing your views first.
Look, culture fit is a funny thing, right? I mean, we see it, we're talking about diversity here, but we see it also when we're working with head offices that are in Toronto, and where, you know, some leaders there are just more comfortable with a strong Indian accent than they are with a French Quebecois accent, right? So chemistry goes a very long way in making people feel like that person could be a good fit. And it's hard to have chemistry when you have language barriers, or when the person that you're interviewing may not be using the same verbiage as what's being used internally, right? So there's that also. You know, look, I'm not one, when organizations have said, oh, but we're looking for somebody who's young, you know, they'll just fit in with the culture better. I'm not interested in working with people like that. Like, tell me what's going on. Is it that you really need, you know, again, dynamic people? Because I can find you dynamic people, right? Is it that, you know, the way that they're expressing their accomplishments might look different, or, you know, we often will get in public companies, a lot of times they want to see people with stretch and people that they can put through their career development program. So to get into that, you're usually of a certain age, right? Like you kind of just got your master's degree, you're about like 25, 26, you're a high potential, versus somebody who's 50 and going to go through this, right? So there's things that organizations are using to talk about, you know, culture fit. I would say, you know, the thing that we see a lot of too is, especially with recent arrivals, they end up not knowing what their value is on the market. And so they end up taking a role that is far beneath their skill level, just to be able to get their foot in the door, you know, cutting thread, working in, you know, the needle trade sector, working for organizations that will keep them down in terms of their experience. You know, I spoke with somebody who was leading 50 people in the needle trade sector. He was an engineer, had worked overseas, had a master's degree, and was making $43,000 here. Okay, it made me sick to my stomach. But, you know, the reality is he came here and he didn't know what he was worth. He didn't really talk to anybody. He didn't know who to speak to. He didn't know if that was going rate for somebody with his experience. You know, and it's, I think as recruiters, one of the things that we should be doing is educating people and saying, hey, your salary expectations are not in line with what you should be making. Okay. And it's hard when you have to put food on the table. You don't necessarily have the luxury of trying to figure out, well, it'll take me a year to find the right, you know, the right role. And I get that. But when we talk about, you know, interviewing, when we talk about fitting into an organization, it's how do you use your experience and how do you lay it out in a way that we're accustomed to here? What does your resume look like so that it fits what we're used to here? You know, I don't know, is that whitewashing? Is it, I think it's more, you know, like you don't put your picture on, like we talked about in the panel yesterday. You don't, you know, put your date of birth or your marital status. You take out your countries that you've worked at, and don't even put that you worked in, you know, 2 different countries. Just put the name of the company, right? Because a lot of resumes here don't have the name of the city that you worked in. It just says the company name, your title, and the dates, and then your experience. So I think that there's things that candidates can be doing to, on the surface anyway, fit into the culture enough to be able to get in, you know, for an interview.
Amazing. Anyone else like to comment on that?
I actually had an experience myself. It wasn't like because there are different ways for people to reject you. You know, it's not just a cultural fit. Like when I was new in Toronto, I had an interview with one of the banks, and it was like the final round. It was just me and another candidate, and I really nailed it. So I was like, okay, I got it. I was waiting for them to let me know when to start. And then suddenly they called me and they was like, oh, sorry, the other candidate had the better communication skills. And I was like, okay. So it means I had an accent or what? So the thing is, I don't want to work in such environment as well. Like, this is not just for the company to decide who to work with. This is also for us to decide who to work for. You know, what value you can add, and is it a good place for you to be there? Like, as once a newcomer, and I always think that I'm the voice for newcomers because I really know the struggle they have. Like, that's a very good, like, great talent out there that we are always neglecting, and I want to be the voice for them. So we have to decide where we want to work as well, when we want to contribute, because this is our life as well. The other thing that Samantha mentioned is the salary. Like, I'm talking with so many newcomers, and you know that one of these questions you have to ask as a recruiter is, what's your salary expectation? And I see that, like, especially in that demographic, it seems like they're desperate. You know, don't sell yourself cheap. You bring value. You do the same thing as other people. Why shouldn't you get the same reward? So this is very important for the candidate as well. Of course, as a recruiter for a company, I can't tell the candidate, no, this is not a good thing to ask. You can ask more. But I do other stuff. Like, I talk with newcomers. I try to educate them as well. I try to be a mentor. I try to volunteer. I just want to let the candidates that this is your choice as well. I don't think that you want to work in an environment you are not a good fit.
Thank you so much. Toby, part of what 3 Skills does is kind of train professionals to advocate for themselves. Do you have any recommendations to the audience if they're in that situation and they want to highlight their value? What are some of the things that they can do?
Yeah, so the 3 skills we teach are persuasion, adaptability, and oh my God, I'm blanking. My team is going to kill me. But the one I want to talk about is persuasion, which is why I was so focused on it. This whole thing around, like, one culture fit is, like, you can tell when a company is just saying, like, we want white people, or like, we want, you know, French people, like you can tell when culture fit is like just another word for something else. I think of Shopify and the fact that I applied like 6 times before I got in the 7th time. And one of the the things I loved about Shopify is that they were looking for like people that were entrepreneurial, because it's a very fast moving environment and it changes so quickly. And that makes sense in terms of culture fit, because you don't want people that are just looking for a paycheck in an environment like that, right? So in that sense, like you can tell, okay, like when people go like, hey, can you refer me to Shopify? I go, like, I can look at their resume and go like, you will hate it here. And someone might not like you, right? Because sometimes it doesn't make sense. And I think when it comes to like being able to persuade a company to take a chance on you, that's mostly what newcomers and immigrants and international students have to do, is go, hey, I know I don't have the Canadian experience. I know I have a different name. I know that I have a different background, but I will execute on what it is that you want me to execute. And so we spend so much of our time just coaching our students on how to feel confident enough to ask for the raise. We had a student get a job a week after our boot camp, and they offered him, I think it was like 18 an hour, something like that. He wanted to jump at it. He could not believe it. He was like, someone's going to pay me 18 an hour. And we had to slow him down and go, bro, you can ask for more. Like, you're in. You're not going to lose the job offer now. Like you can ask for more, but it's different. Like the skill and the talent is equal, but the opportunities are not. So I don't blame people for taking what they get, right? Like my sister finished from Carleton, highest GPA in that year. She taught herself Korean in 6 months. She taught herself how to play guitar, piano, how to do her own hair, how to knit, crochet. Could not find a job. I kid you not, people. The fastest learner that I know finished with the highest GPA, 4 or 5 months looking for jobs, hundreds of applications, could not find a job. And I had to convince a company that she would be the best operations manager that they would ever have. She doubled their business. And I went, like, this is the part that a lot of companies are missing. Like, it's not about, like, yeah, the candidates are missing out on a paycheck, but you're actually probably missing out on your next level of growth, right? You're missing out on your next VP talent. You're missing out on your next head of operations, right? Because your biases are stopping you. So for everyone that's listening, like, especially minorities, like, I understand the struggle. Learning how to be persuasive is huge, right? Like, just getting a company to go, I'm going to give you a shot. And our students will get promotions in 3 months because they're so hungry. They just wanted to get in the door, right? So I definitely feel like that is a skill to learn. Like, just learning how to get someone to be like, you know what, I believe you enough to take a chance on you. Because honestly, the talent is equal, but the opportunities are not. So you need it.
Thank you so much, Toby. And that is a perfect segue into a question that we received from the audience. Do you have any comment on bringing rehabilitated criminals into organizations? This is a very specific group that no one ever really talks about. Society does not talk about rehabilitating them. What can be done?
So I was at a LinkedIn conference last year at Talent Connect, and I missed what apparently was an incredible discussion. It was somebody who had been, she had gone to prison, not sure for what, and had started, when she got out, a company in customer service. And so then she rolled it out in the prison system, and then when they got out, they were able to continue working, right, through her company. And so there was a kind of a bit of a buzz at LinkedIn around this. And since then, actually, I've been thinking about this quite a bit. And we've had a few times in my career where we had done references, and we give a client brief to candidates so that they know what all the steps are. And at the end, there's the criminal education and professional references. And nobody has ever said, look, I have to tell you that I have, you know, a criminal background, right? Because I see it on the list. You guys are going to run the references. It's been dodgier than that. And I had a conversation with a client of mine recently around a candidate that it surfaced that he did have a criminal record. And we, you know, what she said kind of resonated with me is, you know, somebody needs to hire these people, right? Because if you don't hire them, their rate of recidivism becomes so high because they can't find a job. And if they're not, you know, if it's not directly related, if their crime is not directly related to the role, so if you're, I don't know, a pedophile, gone to jail for that, obviously you're not going to be around children. If there's been some issue of fraud, but you're never touching, you know, writing of checks or anything like that, then maybe that's okay. The challenge that we had with that particular individual is that there were layers of dishonesty. And so it just became bigger than what we needed. So I guess there needs to be an acceptance on the part of recruiters and organizations to say, listen, you know, we will hire you. Just, you know, you got to give us maybe the heads up. I'm not really sure from a legal perspective, but I think it's vital that we, as a community, you know, come together to support people who have made mistakes and who need to put food on the table. Otherwise, they become a burden to us as a society.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Anyone else?
Well, I'd like to add the fact that I work in industrial management. Therefore, in that industry where there's a lot of skilled workers, they do accept a lot more the people with you know, people with criminal background. So it's more accepted than it is in the corporate level. So and I'm not sure, you know, and maybe we need to think about that, and maybe we need to challenge the system a little bit. But people that are actually working and producing something and building something that we use on a regular basis, they are accepted for those jobs, although they had a criminal background compared to other types of industries.
Great.
Can I just jump in really quick?
Absolutely.
This is a really interesting topic, actually, because for me, when people come back out into the world, right, society's goal is to make sure they don't go back into prison, right? Like that should be something that we own collectively. And when we look at when, you know, people come out, I think there is a simple path to helping them get to their full potential, because again, it was for lack of opportunity in a lot of these places, right? Whether it's growing up in a household, or, you know, whether it was an abusive household, or just circumstance or poverty, right? And so there's a parable or phrase that says, if you're faithful with little, you'll be faithful with much. And I think that is something that we can actually use in this area, because if someone comes out and, you know, you give them a little, like a customer service job, right, and they are extraordinary and they put in the work, like they should be giving a little more, right? Like they might be a leader that you need, right, that will give people second chances. And that's one aspect of it. And then the other aspect of it is the fact that the internet is the great equalizer. And if we start to teach some of these people how to be their own source of income and to be entrepreneurs, right? And to, I mean, we have people on Instagram that make tens of thousands. We have people on TikTok that make tens of thousands. You have YouTubers and Shopify store owners, and there's like a countless number of things, right? And guess what? When you're buying from a company, you don't do a background check on if the owner is a criminal. And you can actually get them back into the workforce in this way too. So this is a great question. I feel like I'm having a aha moment. So that was an amazing question. I just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you so much. That question came from Jerome. Thank you, Jerome. All right, so as we approach the end of the session, what are some of the things that we can do to not only make sure the conversation continues, but is there an onus on us to actually do anything? Maria Gracia, especially in education, your role is to advise on, you know, kind of strategies and things that can be done to improve diversity and inclusion. Do you have any strategies that you can share with us?
I guess it's different if we're thinking about like on a more institutional level or on a more personal level.
Mm-hmm.
To think about, for example, institutionally, going back to the conversation on culture fit, we could also think about culture add as a concept of things that we, you know, things that diversity can bring and add to an environment. But on a more personal level, I think that to keep to stay curious, open-minded, and keep learning, to listen to people who have different lived experiences than your own. And you can do that by, you know, reading the books, listening to podcasts, watching TED Talks, going to, or just, you know, getting involved in your own community and looking at what your own circle looks like and who's missing from your own circle of acquaintances or of friends, and trying to get out of your comfort zone to meet different, to bring in more people or different lived experiences into your life, and all of this to also deconstruct this idea of otherness and of considering what is different as wrong or not good, not as good. Yeah, so maybe I could think of other things, but I'm going to let my other panelists jump in on that.
Thank you so much. Mata, what can we do?
Yeah, I think it's important to be comfortable with uncomfortable, and just don't see it as much work for us. You know, if someone is not a culture fit, it's on the manager to fit that person in the system. And maybe the managers see that as much work. But on the other hand, maybe it's like adding more value to the team. So I think we have to just think that we should like somehow come out of our comfort zone for this and try to see things differently and accept our differences. We are all different, but we are living in such diverse country. So we have to open our mind a little bit.
Thank you so much. Olivier.
Yes, a few takeaways. When we talked a little bit about whitewashing names, how about we start by getting to know the names of every single person that we work with and pronounce it the right way. So if the person's name is Nozipo, and then, you know, you don't just go by Valerie, knowing that you can pronounce. And yes, I do meet, for example, some Asian, some people with Asian background, and they always would have their name and another name that they adopted. Yes, it's perfect to call the name by the adopted name, but if you can pronounce the person's name, that's how you welcome the person as well. Like when we talk about diversity and inclusion, people need to feel like they belong there. And then always using another name, I mean, they have to do it, but you can welcome the person by calling that person, by, you know, making that effort. So I think that that's something that one person that I work with that always made that effort to call their people by their name, and I want to start doing that myself. And also want to leave because I got some feedback from people that resonate with when I mentioned the fact that a lot of people do not feel at home. So the message is be mindful, think about it. People that you work with are different, and then they are in your culture, in your environment. What can you do to welcome them, to make them feel part of the team? Not because you're on the team, meaning you are invited to the club. So just be more mindful about the people that are around you, and then trying to welcome them. And that's one way every single person can help with this issue.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to touch on a recommendation from Paul Leblanc for everybody. Commit to exploring one aspect of today's session within the next week and proposing an improvement action at your next staff meeting. Thank you so much, Paul, for that. Toby.
Also, I've learned so much from being here, actually, and even just from watching the comments. I think we should have some of the people in the comments on the panel. But I would say, like, definitely start with what Olivier said, which is just closing the gap, right? Like understanding other people's lived experiences, not discounting it, not blowing it off. Like if someone says like that made me feel this way, like understand why. I think that's been huge for us at the organizations that I've been a part of, is me understanding where you're from and you understanding where I'm from, and my life story. But I think the other thing is just deciding that you're going to stand up for stuff, right? Like whether it's a comment in a team meeting or in a staff meeting, not being a part of the crowd, not being a bystander, but standing up and saying something. Yeah, if you see something, say something. I've seen people's whole demeanor change when they know that one other person is backing them. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we can do, especially now, is we're not just going to be, silent, we're going to be loud in our support. And I think that's going to make a huge difference in terms of making people feel like they're at home.
Thank you so much, Toby. Samantha.
Well, I think from a recruitment perspective, for me, the number one thing is, having that courage to let a client know, sorry, but we're not going to work this way. If they, ask us not to present candidates that are of a certain age or preferring a certain gender or preferring a certain race, that's number one, and it has to change. It really has to change, because we often in our industry, in the recruitment industry, will sacrifice our values, or maybe it's not even those people's values, right? Maybe it's just the glory of the paycheck, but that really needs to change. And it's really, from an organizational perspective also, it's looking at, what are your values? Do you even believe in diversity? Because if you don't believe in it, then there's no point in pretending that you care. Because people can see through that. It's like the Black Lives Matter movement and how different organizations were coming out in, support of that. But you peel back the layers and it's just to some type of self-promotion and absolutely ridiculous. I would say, organizing town halls. Like if diversity is really important to you, then have town halls. Let your employees talk about what they think about diversity and how they're feeling, and listen to what what your employees are saying. And if you need to, hire a consultant, because sometimes it's easier for a third party to get in and collect the information and for people to feel more themselves than worrying about things getting back to their manager and the politics of it all, right? So there's that too. And I would say from a candidate perspective, don't hesitate to identify a mentor for yourself, right? To figure out how to navigate different organizations. And, you know, for people who have just recently kind of come and haven't really identified the right role for themselves, like, you know, I love the comments that have been made about not selling yourself short, because it takes a long time to get back to the role that you had or where you need to be. I mean, that could over time represent $1 million of lost wages for certain employees. I mean, think about that. It's huge. So it's not selling yourself short. And, you know, when I say find a mentor, it's also to find out what are the going rates, right? What are the salaries in this area? So you're not stuck at a $42,000 role when you're really worth $80,000. And, you know, the company can afford the extra 38K. You can't.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Samantha. So for people in the audience who would like to connect with you, we have Raste, who has been looking for work and kind of needs help navigating the market. Are you guys open to us sharing your LinkedIn profiles and having them connect with you? I see heads nodding, so that's a yes.
Oh, definitely, definitely. You can connect with me, and if I can, you know, be of service and just listen and trying to see how I can point them to the right direction. But one thing I want to say though is you are at the right place. CATS can definitely help you.
Thank you all for joining us today. I hope that this discussion was useful. I hope that you learned something, you had aha moments, and I hope that you continue the discussion. Again, on behalf of the CATS team, McGill University, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Bye.
I will be back on at 12:30. So if you guys are free, feel free to connect. We will talk a little bit about my own journey.
Yes, definitely.
Sorry, this is Raste. I have add you all in LinkedIn. I hope we can be in contact and use your expertise and help. Thank you very much for today.
Thank you, Rasta.
I love that you did that, Rasta. That's fantastic. Absolutely.
Hi, this is Annalise. I just wanted to say thank you so much for what a wonderful session, and I really appreciate the conversation, and I really hope that you guys do this again because it's such a deep topic, and as you can see all the different conversation streams coming in to try and cover everything. But I would love to participate in something else like this. So.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your comments, and we will try to do this again. It's such an important conversation, and we'll definitely advertise, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
You too. Bye. Just trying to move people over.
Olivier, I think that you may already know this, but I think that your girlfriend works at Polytechnique.
Really?
Yeah, Tanya.
Yes.
Yes, she's here.
Oh, cool. Say hi from me. She like wrote me on WebEx a couple of days ago. She's like, "Hey, you're gonna be in a panel with my boyfriend." I'm like, "That's a small world."
Yeah, it is. Definitely. So
amazing.
It was fun. It was fun. I was so nervous at the beginning. I have never been that nervous though. But I'm warmed up. It's okay. It's good now.
You guys did so good. Let me stop.